There's quite a bit of attention these days to the concept of narcissism, and understandably so. If you're engaging with a person that has strong narcissistic tendencies, you probably know that they can bring out the very worst in you because they have a lot of pathology that they operate with. And in this video, what I'm going to want you to do is learn 8 primary characteristics that these people share, so that as you understand and know where they're coming from, your knowledge can become power and you can learn how not to get pulled into their pathology. So that's the game plan that we have here in this first episode. Now, before we get going, I do want you to become aware of a couple of resources that we have. In the space below the video, there are going to be a couple of links to some books. One is by me, and it's entitled When Pleasing You is Killing Me. And the subtitle is Setting Boundaries with the Controllers in Your Life. And the second book is entitled Ugly Love, and it's a survivor's guide to narcissistic abuse. And I think you're going to find each of those books to be very helpful and a good addition to your library. In addition, we would invite you to subscribe to our Narcissism 101 YouTube channel, because we're going to have a lot more videos that are going to help you navigate your way through this very difficult topic. Now, let's get to our discussion for today. Before we go to the adult world of narcissism, I want you to go back first and think about a central ingredient that we notice on the inside of little children in the school age, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And that central ingredient is self-centeredness. Have you ever had to give a child lessons on how to be self-centered? And the answer is no. They're that way very naturally. In fact, it's just something that every single child on the face of the earth is going to contend with. There will be times when an adult or even a fellow youngster is going to want some coordination and cooperation, and that child can become stubborn. They can throw a temper tantrum. They can pretend like they don't understand you, or they don't recognize the legitimacy of you being you. Now, these kids at other times can be friendly and pleasant, and you just thoroughly love them and all the rest, but there is that selfishness that simply doesn't go away. Now, as a child ages, we say that the child is maturing when they do finally come to terms with that, and they learn how to factor in the feelings and the needs and the preferences of other people, and they understand that there's a whole world around them that thinks and operates differently. And so they look at the variety of life and they learn to embrace it and flow with that variety, as opposed to thinking it's all about me. Well, now let's take a look at the thought of adults who are in that narcissistic pattern. They may have a skill set that allows them to engage with the business world or education world or politics or organizations, families, in ways that they're very adult in some of the external functions that they may have to engage with. And yet down at that emotional level, they're still that pre-adolescent grade school kid that hasn't figured out that the world doesn't revolve around them. The narcissist still believes, like a little child, that it's all about me, my preferences, my cravings, my desires. And as a result, an entire pattern of life is built upon that selfishness, to the extent that many other offshoots will come along with it. And so I'd like to identify 8 of those offshoots, 8 characteristics that we're going to notice that are a part of the pattern. And as you recognize these characteristics, I'm hoping that you can figure out that you're not required to match pitch with it, and there's certainly many better alternatives. Now, the first of the 8 characteristics that I want to focus on is the need to be in control. Don't we all at some point or another want to be in control? And in its best sense, we're going to call that organization, or we're going to say that we have a sense of mission and purpose and intentionality in the way that we do things. And so, yeah, we want to have that sense of organization and knowing who we are that's going to guide us in our life. The narcissist, however, takes this need for control and they turn it into their own personal agenda. And you're going to notice that narcissists use a lot of what I call imperative words: have to, must, can't, should, supposed to, ought to, got to, need to, had better. In other words, it's like they have that agenda, they have it all figured out as to how life is supposed to unfold, and it becomes your job to figure out what's on the agenda, and if you don't, they're going to remind you of it. And so you'll notice that the narcissist uses a lot of ingredients that have that control dimension to it. For example, they can be quite stubborn, or perhaps they might be inflexible and rigid. It may be that there's a persuasive or an insistent element that they operate with. And then when you don't conform to the ways that they want you to be, they can just come on really strong and be really forceful, and they will not stop until you understand that you're supposed to do what they tell you to do. And if yelling and cursing and coercion doesn't work, then they can give you the silent treatment. They can go into shutdown mode. There are all sorts of ingredients that are part of that control dimension that you're going to notice very regularly coming from the narcissist. A second ingredient that's part of the narcissism is a low level of empathy. Empathy is one of those characteristics that really makes relationships run real smoothly, and it's most necessary when you're engaging with more than one person. Variety is built into all nature, including human nature. We don't think alike. We don't perceive alike. We don't have the same interpretations, and that's okay. Not only is it okay, it's a good thing. And so the empathizer, rather than thinking it's all about me, is willing to take the time to say, well, I know I feel this, but what do you feel? I know I have interpretations, but how about your interpretations? Or I have preferences, but I know you do too. And so the empathizer likes to think and respond toward other individuals with that person's perspective in mind. Now, the empathizer can still have their own firmness and their own sense of direction, but they do so with the understanding that there's a community here in front of you, and there's a willingness to hear and to know and to slow down long enough to tune into the feelings and needs of the other individual. Narcissists, not so much. It's like, I don't care what you feel, and I don't care what you think. And if you have a perception that's not the same as mine, you're wrong. And so instead of factoring in a coordinated way the feelings of others, they step all over somebody else's feelings. And the person in front of them walks away feeling like they've been invalidated and they've been misunderstood. And most people who live with a narcissist will complain often, you just don't get it. You don't understand me. And you never do. Every time I try to say something to you, you're just telling me how I'm always wrong. That's the way a narcissist thinks. Now, a third characteristic that a narcissist will engage with is an attitude of entitlement. Now, if they have a real powerful need to be in control, and if they have a low level of empathy, well, then it seems consistent to say they do carry with them the sense that says, well, the reason I need to be in control and the reason I don't care about your feelings is, well, I'm special. And so they have this attitude that says that they need to be treated in a high and lofty kind of way. And, their favorite words are, I deserve, here's what you need to do for me. And they want to have that special treatment. There can be a lot of vanity, or there can be a sense that says, I'm above a lot of other individuals. And once you get to know me, you'll understand why, because I'm really a terrific person. And so rather than factoring in the needs of others, their needs are elevated greatly. Well, then a fourth characteristic that follows very closely with that is what we would call exploitive and manipulative behavior. Having that sense of specialness and that sense of grandiosity, then they're going to make sure that you understand what they believe about themselves. And so they'll force themselves on you, and if you don't go along with their game plan, then they're going to make life absolutely miserable, whether it's just wearing you down until you finally comply with them, or they'll punish you if you don't go along with them. And I've had so many people talk with me where they'll say, I've been exposed to so much of that coercive and that manipulation that finally I just throw my hands up and say, okay, I'll do whatever I have to do to get you off my back. And the narcissist is thinking, yeah, good, that's a great idea, glad you did that. Well, a fifth characteristic that's part of narcissism is the inability to receive input. Now, again, let's think about the healthy person. If somebody comes along and says to you or me, hey, there's something I'd like for you to consider, and their thoughts are different, then the healthy person says, okay, tell me. And even if it's not flattering and if it's not what you want, you're wise enough to know, yet this is somebody that has a feeling and I'm going to listen to them. There's no harm in listening, and a secure person says, sure, I'll be more than happy to take in what you have to say. Doesn't mean you have to agree, but you'll listen. The narcissist is like, why do I need to listen to you? You're an idiot. You're a moron. And they think that way. And so rather than receiving input, as soon as you try to give them input, they'll make it their mission to say, well, let me explain to you why you're wrong. And they'll turn it around. It's what I call boomerang communication. You try to say something to them and they'll just throw it right back at you, and they'll explain, well, here's why you're wrong and here's why you need to listen to me, because I sure don't need this input. It's only going to bring me down. And so they can be very defensive, they can be very thin-skinned, and certainly listening is not something that's a well-tuned skill for them. Well, then that comes with a sixth characteristic then, and that is narcissists have a real powerful need to stay in the superior position. Now, I want you to think about when you talk with a narcissist, do you feel like there's a sense of equality between you and them? You know, you have value, I have value, and let's treat each other on an equal to equal kind of basis. Well, healthy people might do that, but a narcissist is like, I'm not equal to you, I'm above you, and don't you forget it. And so they can say things that are very demeaning and very invalidating, and there can be this sense that says, you're supposed to serve me, you're supposed to go along with me, and the reason we need to do things my way is, well, because I'm better than you. And so there's a lot of one-upmanship. You're always going to be in that low, inferior kind of position, and there can be belittlement of you when you do some things that they may deem to be inadequate or just not up to their standards. And so there's a real sense that says, you know, I'm better, and it's my job to keep you in the lowly position. So there's a lot of shame communication, a lot of criticism, a lot of just putting you in your place and making sure that you know that you're not anywhere close to as important as they are. A seventh characteristic is what I refer to as an alternate view of reality. How many times have you spoken with somebody with strong narcissism and you're trying to explain to them, you know, how things are? You know, this happened last week, and so this week we need to make plans according to that, or something like that. And then the narcissist says, that's not what happened. And you may even say, well, don't you remember yesterday you told me that you were going to do thus and such? And they'll look at you and say, no, I didn't. Or you got that all wrong, or I was misinterpreted. And even though you may have facts and figures to back up everything you're saying, if what you're saying doesn't fit the narcissist paradigm, they're just going to shrug and say, sorry, you got it wrong. And it's like they have this alternate reality, and there's constantly this revisionist history. They're making things up as they go along, and as a result, you can't really get traction with them because we can't even agree on the facts, because you see the narcissist in their mind, they're the keeper of all the facts, and well, it's all about them, so there you have it. And then an eighth characteristic we want to watch for is narcissists do have the ability to make positive impressions for a while. There are times when a narcissist can be very charming and friendly and cooperative and helpful, and you'll walk away thinking, well, that's a nice person. But then behind the scenes, the narcissist is going to continue to be that way as long as you serve a function for them, meaning you serve them. And the minute you show yourself to be other or different, or certainly in conflict, then it's like, there goes that charm out the window, and that monster shows up all over again. So these are 8 characteristics, and going back to my original remarks, and we can see that these are characteristics that little children have, and they struggle with. And when you're a child, you're corrected and you're told, hey, we can do better than this. But the narcissist is thinking, I don't need to do better. I am better. I'm the ultimate example of how things are supposed to be. And so it's very difficult for you to engage with them. But as you understand, you're dealing with an adult who has the mindset of a child, and there's a great deal of immaturity and insecurity that goes along with this. I'm hoping rather than you getting pulled under by all their condemnation and invalidation, then you're going to be able to hold on to your sense of well-being, recognizing that this is a troubled person. This is someone who's struggling, and you can't allow their struggle to enter into your psyche to the extent that you become somebody that you don't want to be. Now, if you'll subscribe to our Narcissism 101 channel here, we're going to have a lot more videos that are going to address some of the ways that you can deal with some of the problems that are created by the narcissist. And I hope you find this information to be most helpful.